In today's show, we have another of our popular Dynamite Conspiracy episodes, and we have a special guest who joins us to discuss the topic, why do UFOs seem especially interested in these particular facilities?
And now, the TNT Talk Show, daring to go where other podcasts fear to tread.
Hello, I'm Tony Fasulo, and I share the stage with my esteemed friend and colleague, Tayo Boya. Tayo, hello, my friend, once again. I hope you're keeping safe and well.
Yeah, what the hell, Tony? Seriously, what you gonna do, eh?
Come on, let's keep tradition. Say hello to our audience. Come on.
Yeah, okay. Hello, audience. You know, I'm just
Your
in a
usual
bad.
jolly self.
No, that's because I'm in a bad mood.
Oh, why?
Because someone keeps calling me. When I take the call, the person, they cough, they sneeze, and then they hang up. You know, I'm really fed up with these cold calls, and it just goes on and on.
Those jokes are terrible. At least this one was fairly clean. But I must say, please don't give up your day job.
Since we have a guest, I decided to keep it clean.
Yeah, keep it clean. Yes. Now, obviously, our listening audience out there can't tell, but our watching audience can. We actually have a guest to cover the topic for today. So if he would like to reveal himself, Jim, do you want to show who you are? Hello and welcome to our show.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Very
Good
nice
evening.
to meet you.
Yes.
Good evening, Tayo. Nice to meet you, Squire.
Nice to meet you.
You're a ray of sunshine.
I try to be.
Now, Jim, for the people who don't know him, he is affectionately known as the above average ginger, and he's an IT bod during the day, but a crime fighter of conspiracies by night. So, Jim, do you want to give a bit of an overview of your interest in the topic that we're going to talk about today?
UFOs, or as they are now known, UAPs, are a little hidden love of mine that I've sort of followed for nearly a decade, over a decade. Well, 2007, like 2008. Okay. I think I started
15 years actually. Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, fair old time.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, my day job is making mobile phones work, and in my spare time I love to watch and absorb conspiracy theories.
Brilliant. And that is perfect for today's show, because we have another one of our famous Dynamite Conspiracy episodes. Now, we're titling it today where basically on UFOs and why they're particularly interested in a particular type of facility, which we will touch on during our show. And it seems to be no coincidence that this is happening. But Tayo, this was one of my topics. What's your view on it?
Well, in all due deference to our guest, of course, I think you know already that I poo-poo the whole thing. I am willing to look at facts and evidence. I think it's very important that we examine facts and evidence and we take it as we see it, but we give it a fair hearing. And I think I've given the facts and evidence to which I have been exposed so far a fair hearing, but I can't come up with anything that convinces me that we are under visitation from aliens. So if something new crops up tonight, I'm all agog, all ears, willing to listen.
Cool. All right. Brilliant. Now, obviously, UFO sightings have occurred throughout the years across many continents and witnessed by many, many different people. And a lot of people dismiss them out of hand as nonsense, because we don't have a lot of evidence, direct physical evidence of these aliens, unless it is all kept away from us, of course. But there's too many people, in my opinion, that have seen it, witnessed it, for it to be just dismissed. Now, we can obviously say these could all be man-made by certain governments with secret black ops projects that no one knows about. There's obviously a likelihood that that could be true. However, in my opinion, the evidence that I've seen up to now lends me to think it isn't man-made. Some of the things are just too out there. I mean, maybe I'm doing them a disservice, perhaps, but what I've seen just doesn't make it man-made. That's just my opinion. But the topic for today in particular, there seems to be an overabundance of UFO sightings, in particular at nuclear facilities. Now, I don't want to jump in right at that, but we'll give some evidence of what we've seen and where they've occurred throughout the show. But Jim, do you want to jump in and give a little bit of a background on UFOs generally and maybe the past where they've been seen, perhaps, or anything along those lines?
Well, I think one of the most famous sightings at a nuclear base is the Maelstrom base in Montana, where this is a base that houses, I think they had 10 nuclear missiles, and there's like 500 kiloton nuclear missiles, and they are a nuclear missile station, one of many that are kind of linked along a kind of line along the through Montana, and they're in quite an interesting part of the world. It's a very remote place, and lots of people working on a site, and they've been working there for tens. Some of them have been working on that site for decades, and that's where they had the Minutemen who literally the people that put in the codes and fire the missiles up into the stratosphere. And during one evening, they had reports come in from the guards that were on duty of lights in the sky, orange globes, 8 of them, colored lights above the base, moving around the base and moving over the top of each silo. As a result of that, each silo went down, so each system disconnected one by one, so that they'd all gone off across the whole of the site. And then they had reports from another site that the same was happening there. So that's reported by a former general. I don't know if he's a general actually, but he was
Captain
a
Robert
captain.
Salas.
That's right, captain. He was a captain, and he was a captain of the site. So when I see men of that caliber, I remember talking to my father about UFOs many years ago, and he's of a different age than I am. He's of a different generation. He grew up through Roswell, and everyone being a sort of having everything denied. Everything was swamp gas or balloons. Back in the day, it was never anything. It could never possibly be a UFO, and that's what he grew up through. So he's also a staunch skeptic of UFOs, as that was definitely very prevalent to make that a ridiculed and to taboo subject during his generation. I think it is still now, even to this day, quite a taboo subject. This is probably the first time I've ever spoken about it directly with people. But now that Congress are also listening to the likes of retired Major David Grosh on the subject, I think it's easier for people to talk about it. And that man came out many years ago to talk about it during that period where it was incredibly taboo to talk about it. So I don't see where he gains at all in his life, whether it be personally or professionally, to come out and tell this story repeatedly, unless it was true. So I don't see any reason why he would lie, and I don't see how he could confuse a trained army man could confuse what had happened that night with anything than other than what he described. So if that's the case, you've got to find some reason for that, and whether it be alien doesn't have to be alien. They could have lived on this earth before we did. Who knows? But where do they come from? I don't know. Where are they from? I don't know. Are they ours? I don't know. But were they there? 100% they were there. So you've got to be able to find something. And I think the only thing they could mention was maybe it was the Borealis, the Northern Lights. But these guys have been there. They've seen the Northern Lights before. They're guards on duty. The Northern Lights don't move in a sort of coordinated way. They're just in the sky, and they'd seen them all before. So really, they poo-pooed the whole thing by just saying that the guards have seen the Northern Lights, and that was how they sort of moved past the whole
Well, isn't there
scenario.
recorded evidence that when all the silos actually turned off and went to a no-go status? So
Yeah,
what that meant was, if the order had been given for them to be fired, they couldn't be. They were
correct. But
offline.
what they said was that that was because of the corona rejection from the sun had caused such high levels of radiomagnetism that it caused lights in the sky, and for that radiomagnetism to disable the weapons. Now that's something that they told to the public, and that was the official narrative, as it were, that was used. Now anyone who the guys that were there said, if it's EMP, everything that's electric goes off.
Yeah.
It's not selective. It doesn't
No.
say, well, you're something I'm going to attack, and you're something I'm
Yeah.
not. It's everything. But all the light, there wasn't all the computers. Everything else was on. Everything was on around them. The only thing that went down were these systems that are designed to essentially launch the missiles. But it was the missiles themselves. It was actually the actual missiles themselves that have been disabled. It wasn't just the systems. They had to physically go back into each one of them and essentially reboot the missile, because the missiles are online.
But wasn't it true as well that the way that this system was built, because someone reported and said, well, couldn't it have been a malfunction on the connectivity between all of them? So when
It's
one was
intricate.
affected, yeah. But aren't they all separately powered? I thought
Correct.
part
They're,
of
they're
the,
silos.
yeah,
Each one's
they're all
siloed.
independent,
They're
aren't
all
they? Yeah.
independently. That's why they're not linked, but they are a silo. So they're they're basically silo. That's why they're called silos, right? Because everything's a silo. They're their own
Power had
container.
its
Yeah,
own,
yeah, the
yeah,
whole thing. The whole
everything,
thing. Yeah,
and
exactly.
every single one switched off. And this was
Correct.
recorded, but the official answer, as you rightly say, Jim, was they said it was something to do with a solar flare or electromagnetic event.
And that's just it's sort of that would be fine, but the captain of the the ship, as it were, has come forward and said, "No, no, no. That's
No.
despite the fact this could ruin my career and probably will ruin my career and will have an effect on how I'm seen and things. I'm really sticking my head above the parapet here for no gain at all. I'm going to get it properly shot off. He's not running around making money from this. He's losing respect, opportunities, gravitas. Possibly he's certainly losing his security access or any chance of him ever having some sort of cushy government job going forward. He's got more to lose than he has to gain speaking out about these things, and he's not trying to say anything really. He just explains to you what happened, lets you make your own decision. He's not trying to say, I know what these are and these are visiting from this star system.
No.
you, so
He didn't actually make any claim of them being an alien or anything in origin. He just said that these things were seen in the sky emitting a light over the silos, and one by one the silos and the nuclear weapons in those silos switched off.
these things were easier to deny before the Pentagon released the Nimitz Tic Tac information and video, and it was definitely easier to deny these things were real, especially now that Congress have sat at a testimony before the House Oversight Subcommittee with Commander Fravor, the retired Nimitz captain, giving testimony about how they recorded that data on their cameras, how there's corroborating data from the new upgraded radar systems, and that they can record these crazy speeds. Now, back in the past, all of these things were denied. Essentially, now disclosure is happening. So I've been waiting for disclosure for a long time, but now essentially disclosure is happening in real time in front of us. So the disclosure of people who don't believe are going to end up being pleasantly surprised, I
Do you
believe.
think there's going to be enough evidence actually made public in order to convince the majority of people who are perhaps skeptical, because they want to
Don't
see,
need to.
maybe like Tayo,
You don't
real
need to.
evidence?
You don't need to, because the next generation will more and more and more will believe. So it'll just happen in a
But
couple of
isn't it,
generations
I mean,
anyway.
rather than this belief element, wouldn't it be easier to put the matter to bed if they, you know, actually came forward and said, yep, we know we're being visited, there's nothing we can do, they are an advanced species, we don't know where they come from, but they're either here or they travel here, we don't know, but they clearly not, they're not malevolent because they haven't done anything towards us in a negative way. In fact, it appears they could be benevolent because they're maybe keeping an eye on us almost, but we letting the public know this is what it is. There will still be people will disbelieve that. They'll just go, nah, that's nonsense, that's a publicity stunt, blah blah blah. I mean, I want to bring Teo in because he's been quite patiently quiet here,
Mm.
heard all this
I
discussion
mean, taking
so far.
notes.
Okay, do you have
I'm taking
any
notes.
any comments so far on what's been said?
I'm gonna start with one that I've crossed off because of something that Jim said, which destroys the objection. I wrote here, I said, are these systems robustly built with multiple redundancies? So that was going to be one of my attack vectors. I was going to say, well, maybe this systems were just badly built, badly designed, and so one component failed, and therefore everything went down. It's pretty
Cascaded, yeah.
specific because it was like, for instance, the launch systems, the actual launch system, which failed, and as Jim said, the computers were still whirring and all that sort of thing, which leading me to suspect that it is some kind of subsystem that was affected. And yeah, in the case of a solar flare, it is possible. I mean, it's not. It is possible. I don't know if it is likely, but it is possible that perhaps one central component failed, and because it was affected by the solar flare. So when we talk about redundancies and things, I'm willing to cross it off and not use it, but I'm still inclined to think it's possible until an actual expert in that particular field says no, it's not possible because of X, Y, Z.
The,
But
the
I don't
the
want to push the point. That's all.
the reason it isn't possible really
Mm.
is because, like I said, electromagnetic pulses, EMPs,
Mm.
are are not selective. They won't selectively turn off one piece of electrical equipment and not another. Everything would go. So they're they didn't deny that the lights were there because so many people had seen the lights. So they explained the lights by saying it was the northern lights, the Borealis. Is
Yeah,
that what
yeah.
it's called? They just said it's that. Although these guys have, it's quite when they show you that it's this, they show you, the really dark green lights. I've spoken to people that have been to see them, and you don't see it like that with your naked eye. You see it like that on a camera. With your naked eye, it's not as vivid as you see
No.
it on let's say YouTube or something, because you're essentially seeing what a camera lens sees. It's not the same as your eye. But to say that all of these highly trained and brave soldiers who all reported the same thing happening on the same day, including their captain, were seeing the northern lights, and that's what caused it because of EMP, if you're ignorant of how EMP works, then you could believe that. But EMP would knock out every light, everything that had any sort of electrical impulse would be gone. It's an electromagnetic pulse. It just makes everything basically break. That's electronic. So it wouldn't just make one thing break.
Well, yeah, like I said, I'm not gonna push the point, because I'm pretty happy with
So it's just weird.
your description of the fact that each one of these systems is siloed.
Mm.
Based on that, I don't think there's any point pushing it because it wouldn't get us anywhere.
No,
So,
so it's got to be something more. Um, well, look, you could say it could actually be an attack by uh, a foreign force, right? You know, is there
well,
some way they could maybe, because nowadays you could sort of think, well, they could maybe hack in, right? Sort of hack in, sort
hmm,
of foreign force could maybe have hacked in on that day, and the lights could be anything. I mean, nowadays you could hoax this, right? You could get DJI quadcopters and fly them around with lights on, and if you had, you know, crazy hacking skills, you could maybe hack into some nuclear sites. You heard of people, back in the 80s and 90s being able to hack into government sites and army sites with, ease. So I'm sure people can still hack into places, and this was back in the early days before the internet. So I don't think they'd have.
1967
Yeah.
to be
So
precise.
I don't think they
So
had even an intranet there. That maybe there was an intranet there. Who knows? Who knows what's in these sites? I mean, I'd be amazed if these sites weren't protected from EMP, because why would you build a nuclear silo, and then the first nuclear weapon that goes off anywhere near it, you can't fire back, because the first thing that comes with a
would
nuclear weapon is
be
an EMP
EMP
pulse. So
buzz, yeah.
I would be amazed if these things weren't protected from an EMP pulse. And you can be protected just by putting yourself inside a Faraday cage. So why these things wouldn't be inside a Faraday cage if they're buried underneath the ground, I don't know anyway. So a Faraday cage has been around since the Victorian times. Faraday was a long time ago that we learnt about EMPs and how to protect yourself from such a thing. So the fact that you would build a silo and not put it inside a Faraday cage seems like a bit of a schoolboy error to me. So I know they don't talk about it, because I'm sure they don't really want to mention how they protect their silos from attack from other people who've got nuclear weapons. So, but if you have any idea about science, you'd think, well, first thing I'd want to do if I was building one is I'd put it inside a Faraday cage. So I find it
recently
hard.
watched. I recently watched a video. I don't know if I can find it in time to share it with the audience.
Mm.
Recently watched a video speculating on how a nuclear war could break out in view of the war in Ukraine
Yeah.
between Russia and America. And it is remarkable that the first strike does contain EMP explosions. That's what it does. That's your first strike will be EMPs, immediately followed by other missiles that are
So
targeted to hit ground targets.
Yeah,
yeah.
So
you'd want to
even
disable
now, it's
all
still
electrical. Yeah.
even now it's still that is still the way that an attack would develop. So Faraday cage or no Faraday cage, it is still seems to be, if these people's video was any good, it still appears to be the standard operating procedure.
Normally, though,
Anything inside a Faraday cage won't be affected by an EMP pulse, because inside the Faraday cage, the EMP pulse is absorbed by the Faraday cage, which goes down to Earth. So any electrical equipment inside a Faraday cage won't break when an EMP goes off. The EMP
Okay.
isn't something they send before the nukes. The EMP pulse comes before the blast
No, I'm
from the
saying it comes
nuke.
with the first strike nukes, and the not first strike doesn't hit. Isn't from the video I watched. It's not the first strike. I used
Eh,
to think would come and decapitate the enemies bunkers and things. No, it's apparently the first strike will detonate in the air and will
Correct. Yeah, in the air.
be
Yeah,
EMPs.
that's
And
right.
then the missiles that follow that are going to be hitting
the
bunkers and
ground.
command posts and ground
The
targets and
reason
things
for
like
that
that.
is to disable and
The air bursts, which
yeah,
is
Yes,
the
the
important bit,
Airbus.
because they fire the air bursts and they basically knock out all electrics and communication. So
Mm.
bearing in mind that's what that EMP pulse that you get from a nuclear bomb going off, you can, if the um, the magnetism in the earth is, in the right way, and you hit it with enough power from the sun, enough solar ejection, you can get an EMP pulse through the magnetic fields of the earth, and it'll hit the earth and it'll knock stuff out. So you can get solar flares that hit the earth that go, and actually cause a small EMP localized,
And that
but
happens, and there's been equipment and
yeah,
satellites
yeah,
and all sorts when we've had a,
of
a
course.
big solar flare,
Yeah, yeah, of course.
evacuate from the sun. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
that does happen,
it
but
does
that's because
100%.
most equipment is unprotected. But when you're talking about military equipment,
Anything inside a Faraday cage.
yeah,
I
it,
could
it,
make
it
a Faraday
seems,
cage at home. It,
yeah,
it, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be a metal ball that's that big that's grounded. Anything you put inside that, like a mobile phone, you could fire an EMP off. That's not going to affect the phone because the phone is sitting inside a metal sphere. It doesn't even have to be solid. It can just be like wire mesh. As long as it's grounded, then whatever's inside that won't be. So even if you're out on the battlefield, you can make your own Faraday cage. Essentially, you're just you're just making something that's a grounded metal, continuous metal cage. So yeah, to not do that would seem preposterous. But the point is that they actually said that the above the ground, the stuff that's on the ground, because the silos are in the ground. So the stuff
below the
above the
ground
ground that's
silos, yeah.
definitely not got a Faraday cage around it. It's just buildings with lights and street lights and the gates and the guard tower and the toilet blocks. All of those lights are on. If there's an EMP pulse, it's going to take the stuff on the ground out before it takes the stuff underneath
Below.
the ground out. So it's just preposterous what they say. So it's a hard one to understand what it could have been. Ball lightning could have been ball lightning, but for there to be 8 ball lightning all in the same place, and for things that have never happened before or happened again to happen when it was there, seems
What about what
There
about?
were
one in a
two things.
million.
Go on.
There were two things that happened here. There was the malfunction.
Mm,
Well, what no, I won't call it. I won't call it malfunction. There was the fact that the launch systems turned off, and then the appearance of the light. So these are two things. So one thing I'd like to know, and I don't think anyone amongst the three of us would have the information, but one thing I would like to know is, have these again, I don't want to use the word malfunctions. Have these systems stopped working previously or afterwards without the lights? In other words, did this failure occur only on this occasion when there were lights, or every single time that the failure has occurred, there have always been lights in the sky? This is what I'd like to know. It's a very important question, and without an answer to the question, it's really kind of guesswork as to what's going on, because we are conflating the two phenomena in our minds, but there's no proof that the one is the cause of the other.
I think you need to watch his interview because he does actually cover that.
Mm.
Um, these you've got to think about what they've created. This isn't just this isn't a schoolboy project. This is top military equipment that's designed to end other worlds, whole other countries. It's the absolute pinnacle of the American defense. So you can bet your bottom dollar, and they will explain, and they have, how these systems are designed to never ever go offline, because if they all if one goes offline, then you've got 10 or 15 others, and that's why they're siloed. So it doesn't matter if one fails, but they're designed so that they can't all fail together in daisy chain, because they're not linked together. For them to all fail in daisy chain in the same night over and over and over again is completely and utterly not a repeated event that had happened before or after. 100%. The guy mentions that. I mean, you've got to think about it. Why would you've got 10 completely independent cars that are driving down the road, all in different directions, and they all stop within a second of each other at exactly the same time. That would be weird, right? If you had 10 cars that you
Mm.
owned, you sent them all off in 10 different directions, and then at a moment in time, they all stopped exactly the same moment in time, and they all broke down at that exact moment.
The
Why would that?
likelihood, yeah.
What's the likelihood of that happening is what we're trying to essentially
I
Assess.
would say the
assess
likelihood.
here.
I would say the likelihood is very remote until you discover that, unbeknownst to you, they were all working off a single signal from a single device.
You're trying to
Then
work
you
out where
the point of failure is, and then you
the
go,
single
oh,
point of failure.
this is the point of
Yeah,
failure.
but these are
But what
these are
about
cars made in the 1970s. So
Yeah.
what device, what signal are these cars working off in the 1970s?
Well, are we sticking to a metaphor of cars, or are we?
Well, the reason we're sticking to a metaphor of cars is because they are a quite well engineered system with redundancies. You know, you don't have just have one brake, you have four. You know, you don't just have one wheel, you have four. You don't just have one door, you
With the
have
greatest
four.
respect, the redundancies might have been targeted at some other problem, and not this one that actually caused the failure. So we don't know that. We're not technical experts. I'm
Oh
saying
no, I'm not. I don't expect anyone to
there
be a technical expert.
might have been redundancies. For instance, if the power went out, so that is the redundancy that they built in. That, no, each one's got its own independent power unit. It might have been a redundancy of some kind of communication or something. So no, if this one can't communicate, if no one can communicate, after what you yourself saying in an outside,
No,
inside
they're a
Faraday
car.
cage,
They're a car. They're a car. So they don't
they are
have
a car.
any
Did you say?
communication. Think of them as a car. I want you to think of the silos as a car
Mm.
because they have their own power, their own fuel, their own will. They're not linked in any way. There's no link. There's no, well, they're all running off the same system. They're all running off the same
Something
generator
must
or off the same
communicate to
power.
them to say
They're,
launch the missile. Something must communicate
the people
because you must get an order from somewhere.
a radio,
Launch the missiles.
a radio that's not connected to the missiles.
Well, a radio is not going to penetrate
But
the
in my
Faraday cage,
car,
is it?
I've got a radio. Yeah,
The radio going to...
they've got wires going down inside.
Okay, so they've got wires going down inside. So those wires are carrying a current of some sort, I suppose, I
To
imagine.
the radio, not to the computers.
To the radio, not to the computers.
So if you're sat inside your car talking to someone on your mobile phone, will it make your engine stop or control your engine? No, because it's a mobile phone. Imagine that had a wire. Yeah, I'm trying to help you understand that you're thinking of these things as a linked system and everything's connected. But this is in the 1970s. Imagine them as their own
60s,
individual. Each one of them has got their own battery, their own power. They're not running off a grid of power. They've got their own power. So
Is it the power that went out in these?
No,
these
it isn't
movies?
the power that
No,
went out.
power didn't go out.
Actual computer systems were all shut down.
So
they couldn't be
I
launched.
thought you said earlier when you were telling us what happened, you said that the computer systems were not affected. I seem to remember that.
Their computers were still on, is the point I was
on.
trying to make.
Yeah.
They weren't switched off from an EMP pulse. Their computer screens were still on. In fact, I don't even think necessarily they had computers as we would imagine them to be computers. They had things with switches and light bulbs. You know, that's the sort of type
that was still working. That was unaffected. The thing for me in all this was this base in Montana wasn't the only one affected.
Correct.
There was another one 50 miles up the road, totally separate.
If you were writing a movie, this would be a really bad movie. You don't introduce a twist like that in the middle of the movie. You say so really early.
That's how it happened to them, because they then got on the phone and say, we've seen lights and all our silos have been switched off.
Well,
so
no. All our launch abilities.
The launch ability of our ICBMs have been switched off, and they're 50 miles away. So
now, is it that the launch abilities have been switched off, or is it that maybe the targeting system or something?
Tayo, he's specifically vague, and you can understand why. He is still a military man who's sworn to secrecy. He worked for maybe 10, 15, 20 years, basically being and in and around working with nuclear missiles and nuclear weapons. So he's as open and as forward and as frank as he can be with us whilst talking
Do we have
about
a
these
link to
things.
this? To this?
I can provide it. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
there's
please,
a
if you
few
can
good
share it,
ones.
because then if you've got any links that you've got, then please share on WhatsApp, and we can then share it with our audience when we release the show. So yeah,
Because
please share those.
because I've found a very interesting group of people, and they are called. It says, well, what are they called? Okay, well, they call themselves, I mean, they are VFX, visual effects artists. But the name of the channel, I believe, is also visual effects artists, so that's not really helpful. This is a YouTube channel, and I'm going to share this with you now. I don't think you're going to have time to
Look at it
watch
now.
now, but I will share it with you. And what they do is they look at videos and they debunk the videos or UFO videos using their VFX expertise.
Yeah.
There are about three or four of them, and they're really blooming good. And they start pointing stuff out, and you think, "Oh yeah, okay." And
Yeah, I
when they
like those
finish, just
videos.
Yeah,
I like
yeah.
those videos. I like
Yeah,
those
I do
videos.
as
They're
well.
good. They're
you,
good.
do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
I
I've
haven't
seen
watched any of theirs, but I try to watch as much debunking stuff as I can. I think it's really useful to make sure that anything you watch, you try to see both sides of it
Yeah.
and then
absolutely,
make a decision.
absolutely.
Because there are some really clever. I mean, there's a lot of the visual stuff is not what I really um looking at UFOs is something that can be easily faked. Listening to people who have got a lot to lose and nothing to gain by talking to them and bringing out their stories when they possibly would be well advised not to, especially in the climate, the social kind of climate of belief in UFOs,
Yeah.
for those people to come forward and give testimony against their better interests for no gain of their own. They're the people I believe. That it's not.
Well, this is nothing. When
It's
I
not
wrote
so
that,
much I've got a video of this, a video of that. Although I can possibly show you some really interesting footage that was gathered in an incredibly interesting way back in the early days of the space program, which I think might be something you'd like to maybe watch and
is
debunk.
this the one of
This
the light
digressing of
that
the
is just a bit close to that I think one of the Apollo people supposedly filmed it. I seem to remember seeing a video like that, some kind of light that was tracking them. I've seen that. No, I was going to say, you said earlier that why would he, meaning the captain, why would he lie? This has nothing to gain. Well, we don't know if that's strictly true. Actually, he could be following orders. For example, there might. I mean, I come to that conclusion because of these people who've gone to the Congress in America. Congress being the unified house of the House of Representatives and the Senate. So they've gone to the unified house and they said, look, we've got evidence. I have seen. I think somebody said I've actually seen extraterrestrial craft, and I think one person says he's actually seen
the beings.
non-human biological entities.
David Grush, David
Yeah.
Grush.
Yeah, so he's saying, and then we were expecting all this to blow up in September, which is when we were promised we were going to have
Disclosure.
a disclosure. And I
Well,
had my own weird conspiracy theory based around, as Tony would remember, he really trashed my conspiracy theory, which was this was based around a pedophile ring trying to distract us from their nefarious doings and the disappearance of up to 50,000 children. Said disappearance still being a very serious matter. Nobody knows what's happened to those poor kids. Anyway, we didn't get the disclosure. So we've got to go back to the drawing board and we've got to ask ourselves what's going on. It was Stephen Hawking, I think, made a clever remark. He said, if in fact the US government has successfully hidden the reality, the fact of UFOs, it'll be the first time they have been successful at anything.
I think they're not. I think they're a bit more sneaky than that. Let's be honest. They can
Sorry.
hide. They can hide things. Let's be
Well,
honest.
all I
We're
know,
doing them a disservice here.
I don't even think they did it. I think it must have been a small group of people who did the JFK assassination, because that is really the only conspiracy I can think has been successfully hidden.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
everything else has come to light.
I'm
a
not
lot.
sure about 9/11.
I don't. Well, let's not get into
9/11.
9/11. Let's not get into 9/11.
No.
Let's not get onto 9/11. Let's stay on UFOs. I was
Yes.
going to make a point, which was that they kept the hydrogen bomb pretty secret. You know, they can keep things secret for a long period of time, and a lot
I
of the
thought the
way
Soviets knew
that,
about the hydrogen bomb.
Hmm?
I thought the Soviets knew, the Soviets, because they were not Russians at the time, they were Soviets. I thought they knew about the hydrogen bomb.
No,
They just didn't know how to make one. I mean, they were trying to make one, so they were all aware of it.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Why would he lie? There might be an occult reason. Occult meaning hidden. There might be an occult reason that we're completely unaware of, a logical reason, and he might be telling lies.
But
Or
then
more
again, why would
likely,
the rest?
he might be not lying. Why would he lie? Maybe he isn't lying. Maybe he is simply mistaken.
What?
Now,
All
these
of
lies.
them. All of the
Well,
people at the
you see,
time.
the
he
problem
might
is
be.
this.
He might be crazy. He might be mad. I mean,
Well,
he might have absolutely lost his rocket. Or you said something interesting. He might be under orders. I mean, that's even bigger conspiracy that he's under orders to come and tell the public this, because it's interesting. One of the things that I think it was von Braun who, when he was near to death, said that the one thing that we should watch out for is the UFO alien conspiracy, because that'll be the one thing that they can use to really scare the crap out of everybody. If everybody believed they were under attack from an alien world, you could control the world very easily with that. If you think people can be controlled well with a pandemic and a virus, could you imagine if they were able to somehow convince you were being attacked by aliens, even if they didn't exist? I mean, then you'd really be controllable, wouldn't you? So
It
it
would be
was
us
it was
against them, and
it was
everyone would
von
want to
Braun
be.
that said
Yeah.
that. It's such a weird thing to say on your deathbed. It's like, beware of that, because he was talking about some big long plan. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy talk.
Isn't he the guy
But
that?
but
Who
what you're
von Braun?
saying,
Do you want to say
Tayo,
who he is?
von
Who's von
Braun.
Braun? Isn't he
Von
the
Braun,
author of?
he was a German. He's the guy who invented
German
he was
rocket scientist,
German
basically.
rocket science. He brought over Operation Paperclip after the Second World War. Who came over to America, brought all his sort of rocket scientists with him, built the first rockets that went to space and the engines that were in them, and it was him that made this statement. But it's just interesting what Tyre was saying. Like, he was under orders to say this. Well, that would suggest that would allude to what von Braun was saying. That's the only you're knocking it in that direction if you start saying he was under orders. So
yes,
either
it's not the only
bonkers.
time. It's not the only time. The Project Blue Book, there were supposedly instances of information being fed to Project Blue Book by either the nascent CIA, which I think was called the OSI, or maybe it was the actual then CIA. And this again was thought to be an effort to discombobulate the general public by injecting these almost straw man incidents into Project Blue Book, so that when people uncovered them, they'll go, "Oh, is that all it was?"
Yeah.
And that would tend to besmirch the other research.
Which you
I
wouldn't do
mean,
unless
basically the
you
same
were
thing
worried.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do
that
that
the
unless
thing.
you were worried about something being found, though, would you?
Well, apparently, what is not being hidden is nothing extraterrestrial. It's simply technology that the USA is developing, and they would not want the Russians or anyone looking in this general direction. It's like, oh, don't look over here, look over there, because
But
UFOs there and things
Tayo,
like that.
it's interesting that you focus on UFO and UAP and extraterrestrial. They're not necessarily what anybody's actually saying. There's still a possibility that it can be extraterrestrial, and some might say it's a possibly higher chance than it being us, but there's also a very good chance that it's something in our control and that's something that we run. But if that is the case, these things, therefore, is what you're saying, these things can move in a way that defies, you will accept then that they move in the ways that defy the laws of physics as we understand them, but they're owned by us. And therefore, does that mean that we're able to already travel intergalactically, but that's just
No,
not
no,
being
no, no. That's not what I'm
disclosed?
saying. That's not what
Or
I'm saying at all. No, no, no. That's not what I'm saying
so
at
how do
all.
you explain
I'm
how do
saying
you
that
explain the Nimitz event where they've provided the radar tracing of going from 0 to 80,000 feet, which is space, in a couple of
I'm more likely to
seconds?
be a computer glitch than anything else, but
It's
that's how
happening
I'd say.
multiple times over months,
Crappy
reported
computers. I mean,
by
I was
tens
a software
by
developer, and I
no,
can
no,
tell
these
you.
are humans reporting this. So
Yeah, I'm
reported
saying.
by tens of people with their own
I
eyeballs in the
was a
Navy.
software developer 20 years, man, and I know what kind of crap that
Mm,
goes in there. So I'm not
I'm
impressed by that
sure.
kind of thing.
But
But
when how do you link the video that they've recorded of them
the
to the
VFX people do a very good job, and I've left a link for you to check. They
so
do
the
an
pen
So,
so you
excellent job.
think so this was released by the Pentagon, this video. So you think the Pentagon released a fake video, which is interesting. So I think what you're saying is you think von Braun was correct in that our government is actually trying to use aliens against us. So is that what you're saying, Tyre?
I'm
Is that your
saying
viewpoint?
I'm saying that the VFX people's video, which is one of the Pentagon
Which the
videos,
Pentagon must have used and released.
which they viewed and released, they're saying that they can explain it as being what was a little bit technical for me, but something
Mm.
to do with the camera, the cameras that were used. That this is what caused that image, and then they actually go ahead and show you just a brief demonstration. They show you. I mean,
Oh, this is the bird really close up, and therefore, when you're in the car and
when you're
the
yeah, yeah,
window
and you're
doesn't
zooming
move
on.
very fast, but the background moves really quickly, so you can make it look like something's going really fast if it's like
Yeah, that's
near.
one of them.
Oh, they've used that.
That's the
They've
one.
used that. Oh, it's something in blur. It's out of blur. That's I love that. They've
That's
been using that excuse since about 19 sort of 70,
Well, that was only
1980.
one of the three videos. So that was
Yeah.
one of them. That was the one. I think it's called the now Tony has given it its name before.
I
The
said that
gimbal or
one.
whatever it was, the one that's
Yeah,
flying
that's
up,
yeah,
it. The gimbal one.
the one flying
Yeah.
above the. That
The
was one. The
interesting
other one was the one that came up in front of the aircraft, and I don't even think that was even the Air Force actually. It came up in front of the aircraft and then made a sudden dip.
Mm.
They explained what went on there, and then the last one was
They gave
the triangular one with the
so did
infrared.
they the thing is what they did is they gave you another option of what that could be.
A very
They said,
credible option.
okay, so
One.
what they so that you said that's what they said that is,
Mm.
and that's what that is. Unfortunately, you are watching the one thing that you want to believe and saying it's definitely that.
More
This
likely to be
is
that than anything else.
definitely fake.
No, I
So
know what
that's
I'm
really
saying.
interesting
No, so
because I
excuse me.
watched both of them,
Excuse me.
and I watched both.
Excuse me. I know what I'm saying,
Okay,
and you've
I
got to
thought
let
that's
me
what you.
say
Okay, I thought
no.
that's what you
okay.
were saying.
No, what I'm saying is from Occam's razor, that's the simplest solution.
Yeah.
That's the one
Okay.
that makes sense. Now, if it turns out, facts and evidence, man, and I'm actually see an alien land on the White House, and then somebody say, oh, yeah, that was us the other day, I'll accept I was wrong. But in the meantime, Occam's razor, this is the simplest solution.
I
It's a
agree. I fully
aperture
agree.
problem.
Which is why I watched it. So I watched it through and I thought, do you know what? This could be real. This could be what it is. This could be wrong. So then I thought, it's odd that this was actually released by the Pentagon. So it's odd that the Pentagon would release this when it's this kind of it's not actually what it looks like. It's something completely different. And what we're showing you that it is, we've got it totally wrong. So our FA-18 pilots, multiple ones of them that have reported seeing these things and have now really pleased they've caught it on camera and you can hear them in the background. They really shouldn't be flying around because they don't know what they're doing and they really shouldn't have done that. But I watched it and thought that's possible. It's possible. These highly trained souls, or it might just all be fake and the voices could be made up. The problem
Not
is that the
everybody's claiming that
commander,
it's
hang on, let me
fake.
finish. The commander the commander Fravor, who is the guy who not only knows both the people in that video and had flown up there earlier that day in a plane, and had also went in front of Congress and sort of made a statement to Congress about the videos that you're talking about that have been debunked. He also mentioned that they had the actual radar traces that matched what they were seeing of that day. So at this point, when you disbelieve, it becomes very difficult to debunk something just by saying, "Oh, it's it's the Oxen's razor, so it'll be just like something that's Oxen's razor." So you can use that when you've only got video evidence, and that's why I say video evidence is less important than people giving testimony, and the testimony that backs up that video evidence is just undisputable. So if I would watch that evidence, maybe along with the video, and then maybe also watch what Bob Lazar said about how these craft move back in like 1980s, and then look at the video again and think, did that move in the way he described in 1980? And did that move in the way that Commander Fravor said it did? And did that video get released by the Pentagon? So do we have some lineage of it actually being real and not something somebody made in a computer program?
I don't know. I've never seen a radar trace. Have you, Tony? I've never seen a radar trace.
No, I've not seen the radar trace.
You don't need to see the radar trace because the commander who worked on the limit said they had the radar trace.
Yeah,
so
okay.
we have to now believe the word of the commander. But yeah, I see what you mean. Let me get us back on point here, because we're arguing now about who said what and when and what's believable. There's one thing that is common, and the whole point of the show was, why does it appear that UFOs, whether they're off-worldly or not, they seem to have a statistically higher chance of being around nuclear facilities. Now, because there's not many nuclear facilities in the scale of the planet, but there's been too many reports of them being at nuclear bases, which is too coincidental. I have in front of me a list, and I'll quickly read them out, see if any of you have heard any of these. 1964, Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. January the 24th, 64, approximately 3 a.m., 2 security guards reported seeing a bright light in the sky. The light moved closer to the base and the guards could see it was a large metallic object. Now, that base is a missile facility base. It was tracked by radar, and the radio operators reported that the object was about 200 feet in diameter, and the radar confirmed it was traveling at speeds of up to 1,000 miles an hour. That was in 1964. In 68...
How do you spot something traveling at 1,000 miles an hour?
Well, I spot things traveling at 1,000 miles an hour all the time. We've got planes that fly at 1,000 miles an hour. I've seen jets fly over my head at 1,500 miles an hour. No higher where they are, I suppose.
Let's just say, let me read that again.
200 feet wide.
The radar operators reported that the object...
Oh, not the two guards.
No. The radar operators reported that
I thought you said the two guards saw that. That's like...
No. The radar operators said...
I see what you mean. How would you know that?
Yeah,
how would they know it was 1,000 miles an
hour?
Yeah. But the radar operators
exactly.
Then there was
calculations.
1968, Warren Air Force Base as well. Again, 2 security guards see a large luminous object hovering over the base, and it was described as being red and cigar-shaped, emitting a bright light. Again, the UFO was tracked by radar at the base. And this time it was hovering at an altitude of about 10,000 feet. 1975, Playsk Cosmodrome UFO incident in Russia, Soviet Union. 18th of September 1975. A UFO reported flying over the Soviet Placetek Cosmodrome base where their nuclear weapons are tested. And this was photographed by ground observers. 1980, Woodbridge, Bentwaters UFO.
Now I've heard this
1980,
one.
yeah.
Yeah,
A
Bentwaters.
UFO over Royal Air Force Base at Woodbridge and Bentwaters in England.
And they
These
went out into the forest, didn't they?
Yeah.
these were reported as bright lights, metallic objects with bright lights that were moving at high speed and making some really sharp turns, which shouldn't be possible.
Didn't
Again,
we didn't we meet someone in Manchester who has
oh, this was the Rendlesham. This is not
oh
Rendlesham. This
okay,
is
Rendlesham.
Woodbridge.
Okay, sorry.
But
So go on,
Rendlesham is
carry on.
another one that shows. So what I'm trying to say is I could read out even more, but I don't want to bore the
Mm.
whole
A lot of them
session.
American, aren't they, as well? I mean,
Well,
even the one in the UK was an American site, but I think that's more just to do with who has the nukes and who
I
runs
think,
the
but well,
nukes.
I mentioned in '75, September the
Yeah,
18th,
yeah, you mentioned
1975,
Russia. Which if
Russian
there,
base.
I'm sure if we were in Russia, then they'd probably, if we had a Russian on, he'd be like, "Oh, I know a lot more," and he'd
Yeah,
tell you a
of
load
that one,
more. Yeah, because
indeed.
they're, yeah, for sure. I don't know.
Well, I've got another one just to keep it simple about the Kirkachev Institute in Russia, in Moscow. And they're responsible for developing nuclear weapons and nuclear power technology. And in 1967, a UFO was reported hovering over the institute for several minutes. It was tracked by radar and photographed by ground observers. So it just seems too many instances of UFOs being seen and reported at nuclear facilities. That just seems too coincidental to me because there's just too many of them. Now, granted, the people at these sort of places are maybe more equipped at reporting things more strategically and clearly and doing it via a proper way. So maybe they have to report all strange sightings. But it just seems too many for my liking. So something seems to imply they're looking at these bases because of what's contained there. Who or what is looking, we don't yet know, but clearly there's too many sightings for it to be just dismissed.
I don't know. The whole thing is it's kind of weird. It just I mean, I've always accepted there are UFOs, but when I say a UFO, I actually mean an unidentified aerial
Flying object,
phenomenon.
not
Yeah.
alien, not alien.
Well, yeah,
But then
exactly.
we're not
Because
saying any of them are alien. We never
all
ever
I'm saying is
said
we don't
that.
know what the heck they are.
No, we
And
don't.
the more I hear about these things, the more confused I am, and the less I know what they are. So it just keeps on being unidentified objects because I simply don't know. I mean, I need something a little more concrete than we've got so far to convince me that it's. I don't even know if it's even actually there. Look, Jim, I don't know if you know about it because we've discussed UFOs before on this show, Tony and I. And the last time we discussed it, I explained to Tony that there are actually some people who believe that these things are demonic. They've gone, they're not. They've gone a completely different way.
Well, I mean,
They
there's
say
people that believe everything's demonic. I mean, if you look hard enough, you'll find people that think Twitter's demonic, or you know,
no, no.
you
We
know,
mean actual demons. The things are actual demons. They tie it back to biblical appearances of
oh yeah,
unidentified flying objects in the Bible, and they say these are demonic. They had to confuse mankind. That's why one of them said this is why every time there's an interaction with humans, they follow people not feeling well, and there are signs of burning. Anytime that they make contact with the ground, there's signs of burning, and so on and so forth. No, I don't know if this is if it's hogwash or true or whatever, but the examples that they gave backed up what they were saying. Well, I don't believe in demons, so we have a problem. I do. I
I
think.
don't disagree with the fact that they might have got burnt. They might have been affected by the technology, whatever it might have been. It certainly, I mean, there were reports of what the Nazis were trying to do with electromagnetism and all sorts of weird
Oh
ones
yeah, that
during the
led
Second
to
World
people being
War.
burnt and everything.
Yeah, and you know, you can muck around with some of that high energy wave stuff and get burnt. You know, you can get burnt. You know, microwaves will burn you. So, you know, these things may well be emitting stuff that hurts people, and they may well be the ones that we're trying to run ourselves. Who knows? I have
Mhm.
no idea. But is it the thing is, it comes down to sometimes it comes down to this um to the physiological belief in whether you think that it's even possible that there's other intelligent beings out there in the universe. Well, now we understand just how big the universe is. Our galaxy has got thousands, of planets that are just like Earth, if not hundreds of thousands, but at least thousands. And that's just our galaxy inside the whole universe. So the laws of physics do allow you to bend space and time if you can produce gravity. So all you have to be able to do is produce gravity, and you can essentially bend time and space. That's Einstein's laws of physics. That's not made up. That is the laws of physics. We haven't been able to do that, but if you take gravity, you can do it, but we can't produce gravity. But we know that if we could produce gravity, we could do this. So what's to say another species somewhere else hasn't figured that out? In the last 100 years, look how far we've got. If someone had another 10,000 years on top of us, where do you think they'd have got to? How long have the human race been going? That keeps going back further and further and further. I mean, in until very recently, they said that the most civilized people that we had were sort of ancient Egyptians, and that was the first megalithic structures was ancient Egyptians. Well, they've now had to rewrite that since they've discovered Göbekli Tepe. That's like 12,000 years old. So things keep getting older, don't they? So the modern time, the modern human, as it were, as we see them, seems to get older and older and older the further we go forward in time. So, we've obviously been around as human beings without technology for a lot longer than we have been with technology. So imagine we'd been with this technology for another 10,000 years. Where could we have possibly got to? Could we have
The only
possibly
thing that
got to-
convinces me that we may be dealing with an intelligent species is that they haven't been stupid enough to stop and say hello to the Americans. And so that is
correct.
that is the one thing that
Until they get knocked out the sky by the Americans, which is what started happening once the Americans had worked out how to shoot the buggers down.
well, there you go.
That's when we started
Well,
getting.
do you know what? There is evidence that the Russians had a dogfight with alien crafts and actually took them down. They lost a lot of fighter jets in the process, but they overwhelmed it in the end. And I'm trying to remember the case of when this happened. It was reported.
Never heard of it.
Sorry?
I've never heard of it. That's news to me.
Yeah.
Never
I'm
heard
trying
of it.
to remember. I'll have to
Never
find
really
it.
heard of a confirmed case of them shooting them down, but you just know that they are, and they have, and they will, and they'll try. I should think they've been told to stop, probably.
Yeah. But what I think, I mean, we need to be mindful here because we got to the top of the hour, so I'm going to ask you to wrap up very shortly. But I mean, we could talk at length on this subject, and clearly we may have to do another show. But really, regarding this particular issue, where what these UFOs are, UAPs, UFOs, whatever you want to call them, do you both agree that the sightings at these facilities is disproportionate to everywhere else?
No.
Do
you think they have too many sightings?
No, I think Teo made a point earlier on that maybe these places are maybe sightings there are so scary for the implications that maybe the reports of those bubble to the surface more than sightings that are therefore less
Joe Public
concerning. So there might be an element of that, which is a really good way of looking at it, right? You could say, well, wouldn't you mention if you saw one by a nuclear weapon, right? I think everyone would mention it, and it would become really well known, and it would be reported, and therefore it would leak in a way. So maybe they just leak more. Maybe
so not necessarily a disproportionate number.
It's so scary because it's such a big, massive thing to happen. So maybe it's not disproportionate, but it doesn't mean that they're not happening. And it also doesn't mean that we've heard about all of them, but it's happening a lot, isn't it? Because it's not happening down my local Tesco's very often, but it seems to be happening at all these nuclear sites quite often. not hearing about it happening outside of Harrods in London very often, but seems to be lots of reports of it happening. So the fact that they happen to end up at nuclear sites more often, let's say yes, maybe that's a thing. If they do end up there instead of Harrods, are they likely to be seen more? Possibly, because there's people on guard the whole time. People who are in Harrods are just walking along looking at their phones outside on the street. So maybe they're just seen more because it's an army site. So
The very point I wanted to make, that is Jim has taken it and made it his own. That
maybe
these sites are actually in remote areas.
Yeah.
People are on guard. They are looking out. They are being aware of the surroundings. So, and then when they report it, because of where they are, it's important. Now, if you see one where you live, Tony, which is a nice little village out of town, yes, you're more likely to see it because it's out. When you're outside, you probably notice it. But when you report it, it's like, sorry, where did this take place? Whatever, kind of dismissed. So I think, there's an inherent reason why we would hear more about these particular places. And I don't have the statistics anyway. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I have no idea.
They're there.
That's
we're not saying they're not there. They are there, right? So
I'm not saying they're not there.
No.
I'm just not.
So we're agreeing they're there.
Yeah.
But I don't think. But so why are they there? Like, are we concerned that they are trying to fire the nukes? Are they trying to make the nukes go off? Are they trying to look at what technology we've got so they know how to beat us at some sort of war? If I don't think it's the last, because if they were that intelligent to be able to fly across the universe, I don't think they need to worry about our nuclear
that's a
flying
separate
a couple
question.
of 100 miles.
Yeah, but that's a
through the
separate
sky.
question whether or not they actually are traveling or not. They could be using portals, so there's no traveling involved at all. So they can actually cover massive distances in space, not by physically traveling A to B. They just appear at B.
Imagine what if they actually are recharging something and they're actually like, do you know what we need is some of this plutonium? Tracking now.
Indeed. Anyway, listen.
There could be
we go.
some kind of natural phenomenon which we haven't figured out yet,
or possibly that.
Indeed. Okay, unfortunately, we're getting close to the end of the show. Jim, we've loved having you on and sharing your insightful information. It's been great having you on here.
You've got a smile out of time.
Do any of you have any final thoughts on the topic in hand?
Yeah.
Live long and prosper.
That's quite a good final thought.
That is a great final thought. Brilliant. We've loved having you on, Jim.
Live long and prosper.
Yeah, live long and prosper. We should do that all the time, indeed. Okay, unfortunately, we have reached the end of the show for another week.
Bye.